How are you?
I'm good. How's everything going?
Oh, it's going well. We're actually on school holiday right now for the Chinese New Year. So we just had our last day on Friday, and then the next 2 weeks we'll be out of school.
Oh,
So,
that's nice. We have our break coming up
oh yeah.
next week.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice, nice. February vacation.
No, I'm not going anywhere, unfortunately.
You're not. Oh, that's okay too.
No, yeah, we actually took the kids to Disney in October,
Oh,
so
wow,
we're not
nice.
going anywhere this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good sometimes just to stay home on holiday.
Yeah.
Catch up. I went.
So, how do you think this particular lesson went? How did it go for you? Do you think?
Um, Overall, I felt like it went well for me because all of my students were engaged and all of the students were able to participate in the lesson and enjoyed it. And I felt like when we do a creative activity like that, where they're finger painting, then a lot of the students are very relaxed and comfortable, so they're more likely to um, feel freedom to speak in English and experiment with speaking in English, which for me is often my goal, is to get the students to kind of just try speaking in English and feel comfortable.
Great. Yeah, I think the lesson went well overall. Let's see. I have a couple overall comments in terms of for your lesson plan.
Yes.
The one thing in reading through your lesson plan that I noticed is your objective.
Mm-hmm.
When we write an objective, we want to make sure it's measurable. So when you use the word some, you had said that the students would be able to identify some of the following letters. You want to make sure
Okay.
that you take out the word some and give it, you could even say something like students will be able to recognize and make the sound of the following letters with 80% accuracy or something of
Okay.
that nature to make it
Okay.
measurable. Because by using the word some,
It's right.
you can't measure
Exactly.
that.
Yep.
Yeah. And then in terms of something that really didn't fit that I liked was the fact that you have a really good reward system. I noted you going over to add a
Mm-hmm.
point or something of that nature, then
Mm-hmm.
talking to the child about how they were almost there and would be able to pick out the bin. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really, really nice to see that you have means to reinforce the behavior you want to see, which is really important with the younger learners.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then also before you got started with the paint, you spent time talking about how do we use the paint, what are we going to do if we get it on our hands, we're not going to
Mm-hmm.
wipe it on others, we're going to, clean our hands with a towel, and you really talked about the expectation that you had and the appropriate use of the paint before you gave it to them, which is a really good way to prevent those, unwanted behaviors.
There's been plenty of attempts at paint eating this year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then just one thing, if you're going to have that positioning in terms of where you were teaching from and the students, if you could move the camera so that I can always see you as the teacher, that would be great for
Yep.
your next lesson or the following one.
Yep.
Just because when you were sitting working on the letters, it was hard for me to see you. Once you
It's
got
true.
up and the students were painting, it was obviously
Right.
fine. But just during that whole group component, if you could maneuver the camera some way that I could see you as well as some of the kids, that would be good.
Okay.
If possible. Sometimes I know it's not because you were seated, but if you
Mm-hmm.
can, that would be good.
Yeah, I know that's always something that when I walk into my classroom to video, I'm always looking where am I going to put this camera? Because we do have
really
a tricky,
hard,
the layout of the classroom can be a little difficult. But that's okay, definitely.
Okay, and then so what I'll do now is I can go ahead and go through scores with you and give you your feedback and any suggestions I have in terms of fitting to each element of the standard.
Okay.
So the first one that we have is understanding learning. I gave you a 3 proficient here. The reasoning behind the 3 is the fact that you had the students actively engaged and involved in their learning. You used songs and movement throughout the beginning portions, and then you had them engaging with the paint. which showcases your understanding for the importance of students at this age enjoying the learning process and really having fun while learning.
Mm-hmm.
One suggestion here, when teaching letter sounds, we want to not call it the letter ah, but it's an O that makes that sound. So a couple times throughout your teaching, when you would ask the student what the letter was, you refer to the letter as its sound.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So just be very careful.
My school actually...
You want to make sure that, you say, what is the letter M? It's the letter M that makes the sound
Okay. I just want to note that I've never done that before until this year, and it's because my school is using a program called Song of Sounds, and we were instructed not to teach the letter name at all, that it would be confusing, and we were just supposed to teach letter sound.
Wow, I'm really surprised with that, because in terms of phonetic and phonemic awareness, they're going to blend the two together.
Right, yeah. I had always taught both, and then, this year my school, they brought in, there was a woman who created this program from UK, and she was instructing us, and so this year I haven't been.
That's so interesting. I'll have to look into that. I've never heard of them not learning the letters.
I know. I think it's odd too, because naturally also, like, I call it a letter name. I don't refer to it as its sound, so it's hard. Sometimes I have to catch myself because I start calling it M or something.
Yeah. Well, I have to say then, kudos to you, because never once did you do that. You got it sound every single time, because I've kept here. You did it like most of the times I have it in here from 9:56 to the end of the video that you did it. So you were able to then seamlessly call it the letter sound, which is so interesting.
Getting used to it. But okay, well, I'm happy to know that actually that the other way is not wrong, because I had always been doing it that way in the past before this year.
Yeah, in the US we definitely don't do that. First you teach the letter name, and then the letter has a sound.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
but
all right.
Again, if that's what you're instructed to do, definitely follow that avenue.
All right. Well, yeah.
Then we have meeting the student needs. Again, I gave you a 3 proficient here. You do a good job moving throughout the room to make sure the students were on task and enjoying their learning. The one thing is, it's hard to fully meet all of your students' needs when you're working on the same task.
Yes.
You had various different interactions with the letters, which was good in terms of identifying, the letter sounds during the songs in the beginning, going around and talking to the students, and then having them paint, which was really nice. But fully meeting all of your students' needs would really mean that they were working on individualized, or at least group activities, which I understand with very young learners it can be challenging. One recommendation I did have in here, and you probably do use it throughout the course of your day, is the station activities, where they could really focus on one of the groups of letters at each of the stations. Or the sound of the letter, I guess I would say, at each station, and then move around. Because during the painting activity, I would question how much they were actually getting out of the ability to connect the letter. Well, I guess just the sound, because you don't teach the name, but the sound it makes while they were painting it.
Okay.
You'll get the formation component.
Right.
And I understand too, there's dexterity, there's fine motor skills, and all of those things that you're trying to teach as well. And I think that definitely was involved in that lesson. But in terms of the letters themselves, I question if maybe breaking them up into individual letters at different centers would be more helpful in terms of their ability to separate them.
Okay.
If that makes sense, yeah. Then we have readiness for learning. I gave you a 2 in this category. You had a good start to the lesson where you introduced, the information very well. You spent time going over the song, which I thought was really great. I do think that in terms of knowing the readiness level in this particular lesson, there wasn't a lot that was done prior to starting the whole group activity. And I also noted in your lesson plan that you talked about the fact that for your higher functioning students, you would be asking them words that began with certain sounds, and I did not really hear that going on.
No, it didn't. Yeah, when I looked back at my lesson plan, I was like, oh man, no, I didn't do that.
Yeah, so in terms of readiness for learning, I think that your students may not have been prepared for that, but if they weren't, then what were those upper level students then prepared for in place of that is what I was looking for in the video.
Yep. Okay.
And then, let's see.
I feel like actually that's an area that I often struggle with, is when I do a lesson plan, I include that, and then when the lesson begins, I often don't carry through on that. So that's something I really need to work on for sure.
Yes, and I think it's definitely more challenging in a whole group activity like the one you were doing.
It's true,
because of the fact that you have so many students that are of that age, and you're trying to just focus on keeping them on task, first of all, on keeping the paint where we want the paint and all of those things, that it can be very difficult in the moment to remember, which student should I really ask the follow-up questions to versus which ones do I just need to make sure they're kind of on task in performing the skill that I need from them. Let's see. And then we have developmentally appropriate instruction. I gave you a 3 here. I think that, let's see, the lesson was appropriate for the students. You had the information sequenced in a way that allowed the students to gradually build towards independence. It would be a good idea I talked about this a little while ago, to break the students into groups. And I do think that in terms of your lesson plan, if you had them traveling around in little pockets, it would be easier for you, especially if you ability group them, to focus on the students who were ready for those follow-up questions or higher order thinking skills, and then also which students were not, and kind of having an activity that was, especially formulated for them. And, and just for an example, an activity like this where you had students that may be ready for letter sounds, it can be combining starting sounds with the letter, a very easy switch. Like, for example, when you have one group come over that was going to paint, you could remove that and then even just bring out like a bucket of rice or little beans that has like objects inside that they have to dig through. Or when they pick out like a truck, they would set it on the T.
Okay.
When they pick out a car, they could set it on the C. So it's still fun and engaging, but it's different.
Right.
Yeah. And then the last one here, do I have anything else in there? Nope, we're good there. And then collaboration with families comes directly off your your reflection. So I gave you before because that looks really good. Just keep in mind that I will need some form of artifact from you before I score your final evaluation at the very end. So if you communicate with parents, if you send a letter home, if you attend a parent-teacher conference, just save something that showcases how you communicate with families between now and the end. And then you can give that to myself and your instructor as an artifact for that.
Okay. We actually do student planners, so I send home their planner every week. And every 2 weeks I write comments on how they're learning and developing.
Perfect. If you could just photocopy one of those and scan it in, or however you do it, and then we could have just one. We don't need a whole bunch of them.
Okay, sure.
Okay, and that's it for my components. Do you have any questions for me or anything like that?
Actually, so my next video that I did, because I did one other video for Standard 2 in preparation, because I knew we'd be on vacation, and I did do centers learning, and I usually do centers 2 or 3 times a week. I don't do it every day, and I guess my big question is, I often struggle to find activities that the students can do independently and that I feel are like building on their knowledge or help building and educational.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Do you have a topic?
For example, if we're doing like our letters, often for independent centers, I have like these alphabet mats, and they're foam, and the kids like match the alphabet into the mat. And that, I think, is probably the best one that I have that I use that's independent, and I hear the students like naming the letter sound while they're doing it with each other. But other than that one, I really struggle to find activities to give to the students when it's independent. that I feel like is valuable.
Okay. Sometimes, so with especially with the younger learners, you can tie in other things in terms of fine motor skills, even things, for example, practicing cutting on lines and things of that nature. So they could practice cutting out the letter, which would allow them to really build those fine motor skills. There's that. You could use like a cookie sheet and then magnetic letters and have the students sort letters on like a magnetic cookie sheet. That's always good for letters. You could also have them, so very similar to what you do with the paint, but it wouldn't be so messy so that it could do it independent, is give them an outline of a letter, like a B or something, and then give them Play-Doh and make them form the letter.
Yep, I do that.
Like rolling a Play-Doh and actually like lining it on there. I've done in the past like shaving cream letters or like a Cool Whip, depending on if you have any students with allergies, where they put it onto a mat and then with their finger they trace the letters through. Okay. Other ones that are really good are things like buckets, like I had said, where the students have to dig through and find things that a letter, and then they match it or what have you. It's good because those kinds of things are good for their skills, but also it takes them a little bit of time and fun, and it usually keeps them engaged.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then water is always, depending on your school rules, but water is always a really good one in terms of getting them to go into the water. For example, we have done in the past like little ping pong balls where you write letters on them, and then they float on the water, and the students can pull them out and match them. Or you could have your TA instruct at a table and say, find the B, and the kids go in the little water table and they find the B and they set it down, or depending on their level, they can find a word or a letter. So those kinds of things.
We don't, I think it would be difficult to bring water into the classroom, but I'm always up for trying it and seeing the reaction of everybody else.
Yeah, you'd want to make sure it was in a fairly decent size, like Rubbermaid tub to avoid.
Yes, of course,
You know what I mean? Like it being a disaster zone. But it can be, once in a while, maybe, change it up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, I think, my issue is I feel like I do the same thing every week, and I don't want my students, I mean, so far they haven't gotten bored of it, but I don't want them to. I want to make it exciting and interesting and new so that they enjoy every day.
Yeah, definitely. And I think once they have more skills, like as the year progresses and they gain knowledge, it's a little bit easier. When they're at the very basic, it is challenging sometimes to create new learning experiences for them because they do have such a limited knowledge base. But if you're ever planning a topic, like when you go to plan the topic, if you send me an email, I can definitely send you some suggestions for centers or things of that nature that would link into what your learning objective is for the day.
Oh, great. Awesome. Yeah, that would be helpful. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. I felt like for my lesson that I taught that we just talked about, I also, looking back at it, I was looking at my objective and felt like I didn't quite focus my lesson on that objective. That was something I think I put in my reflection. Like when I was going around and talking to the students, I was often asking about the color they were using, which I do want to practice with them, but it wasn't supposed to be the focus. So I felt like I kind of got off of the objective.
Yeah. I noted that a little bit too down here in my general comments in terms of focusing on the color. But again, I think it may also be that in the moment, you maybe felt that they weren't as ready for the learning objective, so you went for something that you knew that they would be comfortable and confident in. And sometimes that's okay, and it just means that maybe you have to go back and revisit the sounds, which is okay. I mean, sometimes when we teach, we don't quite make it to our learning objective.
Okay, that's fair to remember as well. It is a part of that formative assessment, I guess. And then going back.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I have any other questions for this. I will say, though, I find it's challenging with the in-task standards. They're just so complex, so I'm still just kind of getting used to what they mean and what a lesson is supposed to look like showing that. So even with this one, I wasn't completely confident that my lesson was showing the parts of the in-task standard that it was supposed to.
And what I usually say is, generally speaking, like for example, you had a really great lesson. For the very beginning, it went very well. Your students were engaged. They were on task. They were enjoying themselves. If you usually plan a good lesson, something that you normally do in your classroom, it's almost always fitting to all of the elements.
Okay.
If not all of them, most. I mean, obviously we'll hit times where technology is involved, or student-centered learning, where you have to make sure that you use technology, or the students are engaged in a group activity or something of that nature. But generally speaking, if it's a good lesson, it fits the standards.
Okay, that's fair. I was kind of thinking, like, if I just video my normal days anyway, then I can usually probably pick some lesson out that I've videoed. So I think I'm just gonna try to start videoing every day, so I can have a bank of videos.
Yeah, and I mean, the nice thing about that too is sometimes when you're dealing with 4 and 5-year-olds, things just don't go as planned, and then you don't have to use that day if you feel like it was like nothing like you thought it was going to be, or if you're filming and something went really well, you can have that.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
But again, I wouldn't be super concerned. I mean, obviously you want to show the elements, so if you're ever not sure, send me an email.
Okay.
Generally speaking, especially in the situation when we work with our younger learners, they can't listen for more than 5 to 10 minutes anyways without practicing skills. So that naturally meets most of the standards, because you have to engage them in student-centered learning, or they're going to be climbing the walls.
Right, so. Exactly. Okay, that's fair. Thank you for that advice. Input.
Yeah.
All right, I don't think I have any other questions today.
Okay.
But thank you.
Did you submit...
I'm sorry?
Did you submit your work did you submit to the platform yet for Standard 1?
No, because I was waiting for this last video. I have everything on there but saved, and then once I load this video, I'll just submit it.
Okay. If you do want to, I would almost make an adjustment to your learning objective, and link in the fact that you also worked on the color with them. Okay. It's okay to add like that second learning objective, because it is something that you did focus a lot on in a lesson.
Okay.
Leave in your reflection that you noticed that you were focusing a lot on the color. It's okay to modify the lesson plan a little bit. Okay. And then also make sure that you just remove the language a little bit in terms of change the word some to a percentage that you would be happy with the students meeting. Right.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'll do that right now and then submit.
You're welcome. Okay.
All right, well, I'll talk to you next week. Have a good week.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. Bye.